Hi, I'm Dan Robinson with the Great Lakes Spirituality Project, and I'm very happy today to be talking to Ms. Nicole Brown. Welcome, Nicole. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Dan, so much for having me today. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Appreciate it. Nicole is the Senior Program Manager for Land Use and Sustainability with Detroit Future City, and she has a history of serving her community, including time working with M1 Rail, Midtown Detroit Incorporated's Living Cities Integration Initiative, Excellent Schools Detroit, and the Woodward Avenue Action Association. And I also want to just share a little bit about Detroit Future City's work from the organization's website, which says the group's vision is to advance the quality of life for all Detroiters through a partnership with residents and public and private stakeholders, and through data-driven strategies that promote the advancement of land use and sustainability and community and economic development. And to accomplish this work, Detroit Future City, or DFC, works for the implementation of the DFC Strategic Framework, a 50-year vision for the city of Detroit developed with input from more than 100,000 Detroiters, which that sounds like an amazing process that led to that. And I want to get back to that in a little bit. But first, can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing with Detroit Future City?
Yeah, in my role as a senior program manager at DFC, really have the great privilege and honor of leading the Land and Water Works Coalition. So since 2017, which was when I joined the organization, we have been working with 10 amazing coalition partners over the years to be able to develop a campaign to really begin to engage residents and Detroit property owners around our role as stewards of land and water in the Great Lakes area, as well as being really narrowing in on the importance of educating them and engaging them in the process of helping to prevent combined sewage overflows within the city of Detroit. Our conversation around water came about at a time when, if you talk to most residents in our city, their context and interaction with water kind of fell into two camps. One, it was a conversation that was all about water shutoffs that were taking place at the time, as the city had was as the city's water department was really, still grappling with like the fact that they are how do you collect funds from users and really trying to like figure that out and what happens when someone falls into default with a payment, right? You have that, and at one time there were like 33,000 water shutoffs in like a year, which is a dizzying amount, right? But then the other side of that was the Flint water crisis and everything that was taking place there. So the context of conversations around our city was not necessarily like on the preservation of our Great Lakes and in our rivers, but really it was, how do I keep my water on? How do I not have it turned off? And then also, this catastrophe that had happened, this great American tragedy that had happened in Flint with the lead poisoning of their water systems. So where we began to enter in was, one, understanding that there was a restructuring of the city's drainage charge and how that was being rolled out to residents and to property owners. And it was not that the fee had not been there; it had always been there, but it had just been buried in a different section of the bill.
Mm.
And over, I want to say it was from 2014 to 2017, the city began to look at how do they provide a more uniform charging system for drainage fees across the city of Detroit. And part of that restructuring is that it began to be, they were able to modify it so that it was not like this hodgepodge of being charged from a couple of different ways. Like, some people were being charged based on their impervious acreage, some people were being charged based on a meter rate. So being able to consolidate that so that everyone was being charged based on their impervious acreage rate, which is really the amount of hard surface area that helps to contribute to stormwater runoff. um, that fee was rolling out, and it was also bringing on about 22,000 new customers to the system, primarily parking lot owners, but also where we were starting to see this charge that was going to definitely increase the overall water bill for customers was also with our faith-based institutions. So in the city of Detroit, like many other urban centers, we are home to a number, to hundreds of churches in the city of Detroit. And when you tell someone that their water bill is going to go up with their drainage because the drainage fee is increasing and they're used to paying a certain amount and it's just for that building, and now you may be doubling that bill because now you're telling them that you have to pay drainage based off of the parking lot size that you have. That was a huge hit. So for that, and also working to make sure that residents understood what was taking place, and also helping them with getting acquainted with the wonderful concept that I have grown to love in my heart, which is green stormwater infrastructure, and showing them how this particular thing can really help to not only beautify your neighborhoods, help protect our waters, but also can save you money. We have focused on that intersection of engagement, scaling up practices, and really helping to create a more sustainable and resilient city through these land use transformation projects with property owners across the city of Detroit. And so over the last 3 years, that is really what we have been doing by focusing on outreach and engagement. So really creating that base layer of understanding and helping to scale people's understanding of our body of work up and the role that they play in the community. Um, and also working around data and research. So, really looking at what are best practices around green stormwater infrastructure. How can it help support the efficiency of the current gray infrastructure that we have in the city of Detroit? How does this work help to improve quality life for Detroiters? And also, most importantly, how does it protect our Detroit River, which in turn protects our Great Lakes, and particularly Lake Erie, which the Detroit River flows into? And then last but not least, really working to be able to provide input around policy advocacy and making recommendations around that. So that is really the sweet spot that we have operated in over the last 3 years, and we've done that through a number of different channels. And to date, we've been able to engage over 41,535 people to date in doing
Wow.
this. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot I want to ask you about in that because that sounds like great work. The part I'm going to start with is you talked about you started this sort of description of your work with Flint and also the water shutoff crisis that would be happening in a lot of urban areas like Detroit. So
Mhm.
that brings up questions of equity, environmental justice in this work. And I know that in the work in a lot of the vision statements, which I love, the core principles of Detroit Future City, which I encourage anybody to go on the website and check those out, talks about being just and equitable. And on the website, it says that the group's role is to steward equitable implementations of the recommendations of the strategic framework. So in terms of the work that you're doing, how do you see that those concepts of equity and maybe environmental justice figuring into this work that you're doing?
Yeah, so for the work that we're doing, and in particular, the department that I work in is land use and sustainability. And so I think when we talk about the strength of cities, a lot of times we don't think about the land that these cities sit on, that they are really built on, and that it's not the thing that we talk about. We talk about transportation, we talk about lighting, we talk about workforce, we talk about all these things, but we don't necessarily talk about the land and what's the important piece of that, right? Because everything is important when you're really talking about how do you create a just and equitable city, right? That functions for everyone. And so when we talk about land in the city of Detroit, we have over 24 square miles and growing of vacant land in the city of Detroit. And so for us, we see that that presents a wonderful opportunity for our residents and to really help shape the future of our city. So with the work that we're doing, we think that, at least some of that land needs to be protected so that we can create open space networks that help provide, um, that really help to bring social, economic, and environmental benefits to residents of the city of Detroit. So for the slice of work that we're working in, for the particular project that I work on around green stormwater infrastructure, really looking at how do we repurpose that land in a way that is productive and in a way that is protective of our waterways, but also for our community members. And so when we think about how do we advocate for more green stormwater infrastructure to be incorporated into neighborhood strategic planning processes, looking at how do we encourage planners within our city to be able to look at different ways and where GSI can be implemented in different park programs, or um, looking at different different ways in which we can encourage community groups who are participating in our city's neighborhood lots program, which is a program of our Detroit Land Bank Authority, which provides land for sale to community organizations throughout the city of Detroit, looking at how we can work with those communities who are purchasing that land and be able to encourage them to implement some form of GSI within the greater land transformation projects that they are looking to do within their communities, and being able to help provide that education around what those kinds of projects can mean to a city, right? So looking at where you might not necessarily be able to have a city park within your immediate neighborhood, looking at if you have this particular 2 to 3 parcels of land, in addition to a rain garden, what are some of the elements that you might be able to install, or bioretention project? What are some of the other elements that might be able to be installed into this area? Can you put like a small meditative walking path in that area? Can you do some really interesting and cool things around like park benches and things of that nature to really begin to make it be that third space for your community, where it can be some sort of park space within your area, right? So there's all these different things that you can think about with this land, but also most importantly, making sure that community is engaged in the planning piece of that land.
Sure, sure. Well, to hear you talk about it, it's clear you're very passionate about the work that you're doing. What's the connection for you, if there's one, to your spiritual life in terms of this, well, all these principles and the work that you're doing right now?
So for me, one of our, I always joke with my mom is that, when Adam and Eve were placed on earth, their first job, their only primary job was to take care of what? The land and the animals in which the Garden of Eden where God had placed them, right? And so I really look at our role as still carrying that forward, right? Is that we, while we're busy about doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing in life, we also need to make sure that we are still good stewards of the resources that God, or whoever your higher power is that you choose to worship, has given us, to be able to interact with and live amongst on this great planet Earth, right? And so I think, as climate change is becoming more and more severe each passing year, it is much more incumbent upon us to make sure that we are truly being good stewards of this particular earth. And so, this work that I have the great fortune to be able to do allows me to combine personal passion along with professional mission, and being able to share this kind of education, and seeing how it really transforms the way people look at their role, um, in our ecosystem, and understanding that even the smallest thing that they can do has a large ripple effect, on our environment and in our city is absolutely huge. And it's one of the things that like keeps me going on this work even in the hardest of days.
Sure, sure. Well, one of the, as you talked about the different partners that you work with in this project, you said there's just hundreds of churches in the Detroit area, and you're
Mhm.
working with some of them. What has that work been like in working with faith communities on green infrastructure?
Yeah, so with our coalition, I'm going to call out a couple of different partners who have really been leading this work and really been doing it well. So we have the great fortune to work with Friends of the Rouge and the Sierra Club, who run our Land and Waterworks Rain Gardens, who run our Land and Waterworks Rain Garden Demonstration Planting Workshop Series. And so over the last several years, we've had the great fortune where most of our participants and site hosts have been houses of worship. So we've been able to work with churches such as Oak Grove AME, Bethany Lutheran, Saint Suzanne's in Cody Rouge, and a number of others to really be able to work with them to go in and not only plant this Detroit Water and Sewage Department green credit worthy garden that would allow them to get a credit from their drainage fee on their bill. But also the beauty in that is that within the workshop series is that we are working with these houses of worship. We're working with their parishioners to be able to move forward the theory around being a land and water steward, right? And watching how these churches have been able to really incorporate that into their messaging and how they're interacting with their parishioners. And that has been the thing that has been quite lovely to be able to see all of this turn full circle. And so the other piece of that is also seeing how these churches have really, those who may have grown up in the faith, in various faiths, understand that part of the church's core tenets and mission is to also be change agents within their community. And seeing how each of these churches have been able to really take our message and literally run with it in their communities and deepening their roots has been absolutely fascinating. And I'll give a really good example of this. One of our community partners at St. Suzanne, which also they have a recreation center called St. Suzanne Cody Rouge Recreation Center, which serves as a hub in one of our West Side communities, has done more than I could have probably ever hoped and wished and dreamed of in terms of like being a partner and seeing them be able to really take this concept and run with it. So they, for all intents and purposes, are really one of what I would say a model um, a model hub for stewardship for land and water stewardship and sustainability throughout the city. So at this particular site, they've worked with our partners to be able to install 4 rain gardens on their site.
Wow.
They are a pilot program. We did a pilot program around depaving for them last year. There's a solar program that's in the work at this church in their rec center. But the bigger piece of it is how they have really engaged community and their parishioners in this work. So now they have summer programs over the last 3 years where they work with high school and middle school students, and those students have helped build out those rain gardens. They work with Friends of the Rouge and Sierra Club to have a stormwater management training program to teach local residents how to actually build and maintain these kind of GSI practices like rain gardens and bioswales and teaching them how to disconnect downspouts and install water catchment systems. They have a school that's in the building, and then some of this has been incorporated into like the science lessons for the kids. So really seeing how our houses of worship have been able to like take this work and really be able to run with it and incorporate it into the work that they've done has been fascinating. And we also have a new partner to the coalition this year, Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, and they are a organization that works with churches all over Southeast Michigan. And so part of what they're doing is applying a lot of the principles they have learned and done through their energy efficiency work with churches to this water aspect now. And I'm really excited about the work that they're going to be doing with faith, but with their membership over the next year.
Wow. Well, clearly, you're coming to the leadership, you're talking to the leadership of these congregations, and you're telling them about the work you're doing and trying to have them get on board as a community or a congregation. How do
Mhm.
you find the leaders communicating the rationale for this to their congregational members? I mean, how are they pitching this to say this is why we should be doing this? Do you hear how do you hear that happening?
Yeah, so the from how we've heard it, is it's really been taking it back to the word, right? Like taking it back to their very foundations and really looking at how they are able to incorporate it into sermons, right? And so it's been refreshing to be able to see that in a couple of different forms. We've seen people weave it into like sermon series about like caring for your neighbor, right? And part of caring for your neighbor may be making sure that we have healthy waters, right? And so it's been fascinating to see how everyone does it differently. To see how people are able to do that with younger children and like Sunday school lessons to like a broader reach of a general sermon that is being preached to their parishioners has been really fascinating to see. And being able to have those volunteers, I will say this 10, 15 times over, all of these projects are done with volunteer power and being able to see how people are really tithing of their time in this way, right? Has been really interesting over the last couple of years,
Sure,
as
sure. Wow.
well as being a good steward of the resources, right? So that's the other piece of this, right? Is that we are doing it for all of us and other environmental benefits, but the other big piece of this is being a good steward of the faith-based organizations resources because these churches, as I mentioned earlier, are being charged a drainage fee now, like that incorporates their parking lot. And so really looking at how, if you can get people to understand this is a solution that we can have, this is the health and environmental benefits that we can have, but also the other piece of this is that we're building this, then we're also able to help save money from paying a fee by building this particular infrastructure practice on our site. So it really has been wonderful to see the two balance each other out.
Nice, nice. The other thing I want to ask you about is so Detroit sits at a really interesting place in the Great Lakes, that connecting the Detroit River going by right next
Mhm,
to Lake St. Clair. So Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, the waters from Lake Superior all flow through by Detroit
mhm.
down to Erie and Ontario. So it's a really critical spot in the Great Lakes. So I want to ask you. There's some references to the Great Lakes in the strategic framework that DFC put together, and in fact, I thought it was interesting in the land use section of the framework. It starts out with this great story of this one family in Detroit where the gentleman in the story talks about occasionally going out on a boat with his grandfather.
Mhm.
And so there's some clear connections to the Great Lakes. I'm just curious about, what difference do you think it makes to have Detroit and your work located in this particular place on the Great Lakes, especially when you're working with issues around, like for example, water, access to water, or storm water retention and usage.
I think it makes a huge difference, right? And it has been wonderful to see over the last few years people really develop a stronger connection and understanding of the place of importance that Detroit has in making sure that we are helping to steward not only the water from the Detroit River, which is our drinking water source, but also the critical role that this plays in caretaking for nearly a third of the world's freshwater source. Like when we're out and about and we're working with communities and we're sharing with them like the importance of where we sit. We're telling them about the fresh water source, like how our Great Lakes are make up 90% of the country's fresh water source. We're one third of the world's fresh water source. When you start to tell people that, it you begin to see like this light bulb that where they have this like aha moment, and it radically changes people's connection and perception of what they do and how it contributes to the health and well-being of our water, right? Because there's a sense of pride when you think about, Detroit. Yes, we are the city that put the world on rails, but we can also be the city that leads the world in stewardship of our water resources. And so being able to see people make that connection and wanting to get more engaged and more involved, whether it is, planting a tree, and helping to not only develop more tree canopy, but also helping to stop CSOs, because trees are like stormwater superstars, to getting out and wanting to go further than just doing GSI and maybe connecting up with like one of our watershed groups, like a Friends of the Rouge, or any one of our other groups, to do like river cleanups, or helping to do like participate in citizen science groups. I feel like our work is a bit of a gateway. Like, we give them the taste of it and we say, this is GSI, this is great. But being able to see them want to go forward and become even more active in the care and protection of our waterways, has been amazing. And being able to see that, and for people to know how close, like the immediate connection, that whatever we do in Detroit has an impact on Erie, which then has a greater impact on our overall water system. And seeing people's behavior change, has really been fulfilling for our team.
Nice. Well, it sounds like from what you're saying that that sense of citizen and resident engagement in this work is really important. So we have just a couple minutes left, but I just real briefly wanted to ask you about how Detroit Future City got over 100,000 Detroiters involved in putting this strategic framework together. I mean, that must have been an incredible experience. I know you were talking about it as a participant earlier, but before we got into the conversation. But anyway, yeah, that how did that happen?
Yes, it is quite a feat, and it is still in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the largest community participation in a for having the largest community participation in a community planning project.
Wow.
And actually, we have a community engagement table that tour that table probably has more miles on it, than any car I have ever owned, and is now and it is now in the Smithsonian.
Oh
But
wow.
I'll tell you, when I first engaged with Detroit Future City, it was not as a staff member; it was as a representative for an organ for Midtown Detroit Inc. And I remember when they were coming to be and they were developing this framework, because initially we were embedded within our city's uh, economic growth corporation, and then in 2015 we spun out to be our own 501c3 nonprofit. But seeing the development from the outside, the founders and really the core founding team of DFC, when it was the Detroit Works Project, had placed such a premium on making sure that community was engaged in this planning process, and that residents were at the table, and it wasn't just getting information from like, we're going to go to this black club or we're going to go to this nonprofit and those are going to be the people that speak for the residents. That team was intentional in making sure that we had over 163,000 connections to residents and to stakeholders and to everyone, from residents to the private to the public sector and philanthropy and everyone in between, to make sure that they had a voice in this setting of a 50-year vision. It's a plan. It's not a plan, but it's a vision. And really, from that, you now have our implementation office. And so it's what's been rewarding is that that work that we've done in the very beginnings and the roots of our organization is work that continues today, and how we work with different community organizations to be able to when how we work with different community organizations, the private sector, the public sector, residents, and being able to help drive the implementation of parts of this plan to realization. So we um, really classify ourselves as a research think and do tank. And so the beauty of what we do is that we're able to take all of this, we're able to take research reports and data that we've developed and have these tools and help others be able to advance this work. So at DFC, yes, we're doing a lot of like even with our project in land use and sustainability, we will do a lot of planning work with organizations to help them get there to implement work. And so for us over the last since 2012 when we released the book, um, it's really been a joy to see our organization work with hundreds of community groups to do projects and land transformations with our Working with Lots program. It's been a joy to see our Center for Equity Engagement and Research and the massive amounts of publications that they are able to publish and how those publications have been really utilized in helping to drive decision making and influence decision making on projects from a community level and working with the city and with our community economic development department and looking at how they're moving forward work within a new housing compact and as they're addressing issues around housing in the city of Detroit, both on the single family rental side as well as the multi-tenant side, and really looking at how do we answer those problems. So we have done a lot of work, but we still have quite a ways to go to say that we've completed this vision for the city of Detroit. But it really has been a joy to continue that work, and we look forward to doing so far into the future.
And Nicole, if people are interested in the work of Detroit Future City, where can they find you on the web?
Absolutely. They can visit us at www.detroitfuturecity.com.
Wonderful. And are you on social media at all with any of this?
Yes, we are. You can find us across Instagram, across Facebook, and LinkedIn at Detroit Future City.
It's just so exciting to hear the work that you're doing and involving so many people in that. Thank you so much, Nicole, for the time to talk today. I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
All right. You take care.